Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today. We are here to discuss action steps that I am taking based on a forensic audit of the Providence Tax Collector's Office conducted at my direction by the accounting firm KPMG. The audit had two objectives. The first was to get a thorough and impartial report of all of the circumstances surrounding an episode that began when the tax collector accepted a check that was known to have insufficient funds for my brother John as collateral for his client's tax liability. The second was to review the broader policies and procedures of the tax collector's office because it was immediately apparent that significant changes were necessary. It is very clear from the audit that despite the extraordinary gains that we have made in modernizing and professionalizing Providence City government, the tax collector's office has existed as a serious blind spot. The audit depicts an office where a single individual exercised extraordinary personal discretion with almost nothing in the way of real professional guidelines, policies, or procedures. The auditors made similar observations to those that had been made by the city's finance director, the new finance director, after he arrived at the end of 2007. In fact, he had already conducted a careful review of the functioning of the tax collector's office and had serious concerns about the operation of that office. That process ultimately resulted in the finance director asking for the resignation of the tax collector on September 15th of last year. Shortly after that incident, the tax collector made comments to the media alleging that members of my staff had sought to unduly influence decisions that were before him. These, of course, became the impetus for the audit as well as for the investigation by the state police. So let me first address those issues, beginning with the check incident. As I have said, the audit paints a portrait of errors in judgment by the parties involved. My brother should have never been involved in a case with the City of Providence in the first place. The tax collector and the collection lawyer should never have entered into this kind of agreement. Finally, my staff should have put a stop to the arrangement when they learned about it, rather than trying to help the parties finalize the transaction and get the taxes paid in an attempt to shield me from embarrassment. The audit also recounts additional occasions of tax adjustments made by the tax collector. Before I address them specifically, it's really important to place them into context. More than 2,000 taxpayers who believe they've received an incorrect judgment by the tax collector's office have been assisted by my Office of Neighborhood Services. Almost 20% of these have resulted in adjustments made by the city tax collector since I took office. And that is only a fraction of the total number of adjustments that are made by the collector, which originate after individuals go directly to the collector's office, come to the mayor's office, go to the Office of Neighborhood Services, or go to a council person or various other places to ask for assistance with their tax dispute. And at some point at the end of the conference, you'll be given a fact sheet that gives more detail, including some examples when I have personally made recommendations to ONS that relief to residents is appropriate, residents that I've never met before, in fact. As to the 4 instances that the tax collector chose to share, all of these adjustments that were sought in those cases were justified and reasonable. In one case, a taxpayer was charged interest and penalties for paying taxes late after he had sent his tax check on time and placed it in a Narragansett Electric envelope and placed his electricity check in a tax collector's envelope. I referred the matter to a member of my staff with the recommendation that the taxpayer not be charged the penalty and interest, and in fact they verified that in fact National Grid had received his check. And according to the collector's own records, situations like this are routinely grounds for an adjustment. The second involved a taxpayer who was charged an interest penalty for paying taxes even though the city never sent him a bill. The taxpayer appealed to me and to his council person and said that it was not fair that he be charged penalties and interest when he never received a bill from the City of Providence. We also confirmed that. I referred this to the Office of Neighborhood Services with the recommendation that the interest penalty should not be charged to a taxpayer who had not received a tax bill. And this is, again, a common reason for adjustment in the tax collector's office. The third did not involve me, but involved members of my staff who asked that a property be removed from the tax sale because it was going to be sold privately and would result in the city receiving its full taxes. The tax collector asked for a purchase and sales agreement in that case. It was produced by the taxpayer. The property was then removed from the tax sale list. the taxpayer was allowed to sell the property, which resulted in full payment of all the outstanding taxes to the City of Providence. The fourth and final matter involved the city planning director asking that a property be removed from that year's tax sale because the tax liability was already an integral part of a sales negotiation in a large economic development project. This arrangement would mean much more revenue to the city. In each of these cases, I stand firmly by the city's decision in every instance that I've referred a matter when taxpayers claim that they were being treated unfairly. But what this audit makes clear, and what the questions around all these incidents underscores, is that big changes are necessary in the office of the tax collector. The action steps I'm about to announce are not based on any single incident, but on a collective review of all the facts in these cases. The audit clearly supports the finance director's original conclusion that new leadership is required in the office of the tax collector. Therefore, the first action step I'm taking is to create a search committee for new leadership in that office, which will be chaired by Norm Richter, who is the Vice President for Taxes at Textron. Second, I've signed an executive order to establish a new open government website called providencesunshine.com, where the city will post all future adjustments made to taxes, as well as the underlying rationale for the change for the entire public to view. Third, I am sending an ordinance to the City Council today that will broaden the responsibilities of the Board of Tax Assessment Review. This will give taxpayers an independent body that will hear their appeals and make a formal recommendation to the tax collector. And fourth, we are immediately implementing 12 recommendations from the audit. We're studying 9 others for future implementation, and we're working with software vendors to discuss the feasibility of implementing 4 others. Among the measures we're implementing immediately are automating the tax payment process as fully as is technologically possible, implementing internal security measures to ensure against theft, imposing strict policies on the handling of funds and access to the safe, adopting a formalized interest rate effective date approval policy, and imposing a secondary review of all payment plans. Rich Kerbel, the city's Director of Administration, will fill you in on the details of those recommendations and the implementation plan. And I don't know, Karen, you can hand out the, and there are copies of the adjustments that I referred to earlier in the comments.